All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to the Australia at Home series. And I'm Paul Sheridan. I'm from the Australian Conservation Foundation and we've organised today's webinar. Before I carry on any further, I just want to acknowledge that I'm here on Gadigal land here in Redfern in Sydney, and I know we're all meeting on the lands of First Nations people all over Australia, and it's land that was never ceded. So I want to pay respects to the elders wherever you are, past, present and emerging, and also to acknowledge that we have the honour of including a Yuin man from the south coast of New South Wales today, who you'll hear a bit more from as well. Before we go any further, there's a few ground rules just for the hour-long webinar today, and for those of you who haven't been to any of the lunchtime sessions. So please turn your screen to gallery mode, which is up in the top right corner of your Zoom screen, and turn your cameras on, and you will get a sense of, the hundreds, actually 400 or so people who have registered for today's webinar. So it's a great turnout. Also open your chat on the bottom of your screen. Please introduce yourselves and put any questions in there. We'll be monitoring the chat and calling on members of the audience during the discussion to ask you questions. And finally, we're going to be recording the video. So let's keep it all above shelf, hey? Okay, let's get underway. As I said, ACF has organised today's webinar, and the reason we did this in the format for it, a discussion with our three speakers and also including our facilitator, Osher Günsberg, TV presenter and podcaster, is that we had the honour of meeting Michelle, Dan and Don in January, really at the height of the bushfire crisis. Remember that, just back in January. And what struck us, not only were these people who've had unique and quite terrifying, in some cases, experiences themselves individually, but really demonstrated a level of resilience, both individually and as a community, that really struck us as something that we can all learn from. And I don't think my sense and our sense at ACF is that those lessons resonate as strongly now, if not more importantly, as we move into a post-COVID recovery period. So look, I want to hand over now to our facilitator, Osher Günsberg, and Osher can introduce himself, I'm sure. So over to you, Osher, and thank you, speakers.
Thanks, Ace Paul. Thanks for having me. G'day, everybody from all over the country and the world. Today's welcome to my home. We are we're about 1 kilometre from the ocean here in Sydney, which is really quite lovely. And even though we're 1 kilometre from the ocean, we are 78 kilometres from the fire line that happened across the summertime, and we had ash in our backyard and our eyes stung from the smoke across the summertime. And I went to ride my scooter up to get the shops. I had to wipe the ash off of my scooter seat, and that was pretty terrifying for us. And if you don't know my story, about 6 years ago now, I kind of fell off the face of the earth with climate anxiety that started manifesting as paranoid delusions, episodes of psychosis manifesting as paranoid delusions. It was very, very difficult. I would always joke to my psychiatrist, why can't I be afraid of geese or scaffolding or something? How come it has to be, something that is so real and so visceral? And I've gotten a lot better, but it's still, it's still hard to do. And this conversation indeed is quite hard for me to have, but you've got to push into things that frighten you. And understandably, it's a fair amount of fear to have. And it was really weird for me across the summer was, I felt for the first time since I got sick, I'm not alone, because I could start to see the look in my eye that I had a couple of years back in other people's eyes. And as horrible as that was, it did make me start to feel, other people are seeing as well. And I personally feel this situation now with the pandemic, where we see a global problem that is requiring a global solution and community engagement, community cooperation to get through it, is very much a test run. It's very much an opportunity for us to see how much more resilient we need to be, and the opportunities that we have to grow on the other side of this economically could most definitely advance us very, very quickly as far as climate action as climate action goes. But I'm very grateful to be speaking with everybody here today and to introduce our three speakers. I'll just quickly introduce them and then we'll have a bit of a chat. Our first speaker today is Dr. Michelle Hamrosi from Browley, which is near Batemans Bay on the south coast of New South Wales, right on the edge of the Eden-Monaro electorate. Michelle's a general practitioner, a mother of 3 young kids, and someone who had a beautiful bowl of oatmeal and poached rhubarb and honey from her garden this morning for breakfast. Dan Morgan is a Djiringanj man from the far south coast of New South Wales near Bega. Dan is a cultural burner. Dan has deep insights into using traditional knowledge to keep country healthy. And Don McPhee is a volunteer firefighter with the New South Wales Fire Service, Rural Fire Service, but also has extensive experience in land management and water catchment management. Don, he lives near Tathra and was on the front line of the recent bushfires that swept through Cobargo on New Year's Eve. So let me start with you, Michelle, if that's okay. Dr. Michelle Hamrosi. Dr. Michelle Hamrosi. Michelle, can you talk to us, please, about your experience of the bushfires across the summer and how that affected you and your community and your family?
Thank you, Osher, and thank you, ACF, for putting on this event. So my family and I moved to the south coast of New South Wales about 7 years ago now, and we instantly fell in love with the area and were made to feel at home in the community here. But over this past Black Summer, my family and I, we had to evacuate 3 times due to immediate threats of bushfires to our home on the south coast. And amongst this, we were trying to juggle the immediate needs of our family, but also trying to support some of the physical and mental well-being of our community. Every day I remember waking up, we would check the news, the Fires Near Me app, and the weather. And each day we'd ask ourselves, are we safe where we are, or where we're going to work, or where our children are going? And if we were advised to evacuate, you know, where is safe to go? We were never really sure. And what should we prepare? So the bushfires came into near where I live and the region of Batemans Bay on New Year's Eve. And the practice I work at was unable to open for a week as a result. And when we did open, the first couple of days we had no power, no phones or internet, and we just did a walk-in clinic in sort of half darkness. We had some head torches if we needed, and it was like really something I'd never experienced before. Many doctors, myself included, have seen the health impacts of the bushfires, including direct smoke exposure and the consequences of that, some which Osher mentioned. So psychological distress and grief, direct trauma, and exacerbation of underlying chronic disease and mental illness. Many of these acute mental impacts then go on and can persist in more chronic forms of mental illness. And these we will only see in the coming months and years. So in my South Coast community, as you're probably no doubt aware, hundreds of houses and properties were destroyed. Many people were left homeless without income or livelihoods. But everyone was affected one way or another. And I've just even been speaking to a friend who's helping in a recovery centre, and she said that only in the last week, still people have emerged just now, months after the bushfires have passed, seeking support for the first time. Some who have been able to get funding from insurance are rebuilding, and others have bought new homes altogether and have relocated. The sense of rebuilding just being far too overwhelming. But there are many who are grossly uninsured or not insured at all, and they face much tougher situations. Some of them have been helped with donated caravans and are living in those caravans surrounded by the rubble of what's left of their homes. We can't even begin to appreciate how many of these individuals and families at their most vulnerable are now thrust into another crisis. Just at a time when we're all coming together to support each other, now abruptly, we've been required to socially distance for our health and safety. And so many of those support networks formed by the community groups have had to pause because of the pandemic. And on the background of those traumatizing events of last summer, being externally threatened yet again has led to many people to become moribund with fear. It doesn't help that in our community here, our hospitals do not have the capacity for critically unwell people. We don't have an ICU. So these times, we're experiencing a lot of social isolation, and especially those living alone in tiny spaces with children. It's a really another blow for community mental health. I just want to share something that my daughter said to me the night we returned home after being evacuated the first night. And we were sitting around having dinner that was cooked on our camp stove because we had no power. And she looks up at me and she says, "Mum, I just want it to be normal again. I'm just imagining the future," she says. "Everything is dead and brown. There is no food, and there is mountains of plastic, and the air is filled with pollution." As you can imagine, I was so shocked to hear her say that. And I think back to when I was her age, and the biggest conundrum I had was what I was going to name my new litter of kittens. And I never recall feeling fears like that for my future, or feeling fears of bushfire, despite actually growing up in the heart of the Dandenong Ranges in Victoria. But young people like my children are living in a time of climate breakdown, and they see and experience the changes. They inhaled the smoke day after day. They saw the ash-covered beaches. Many saw flames approaching and enveloping their homes. And now, after a summer spent indoors, escaping heat and smoke, we are indoors again, escaping the coronavirus. We don't know what is normal now. In this ever-changing world, we are seeing slowly breaking down. Thank you for listening to my story.
Michelle, thank you so much for sharing that, and thanks for the visuals there as well to give us some context there. I do want to come back and discuss that a little more with you, but I would like to now come to Don. Don McPhee is as I mentioned, he's a volunteer firefighter with the New South Wales Rural Fire Service. He's also got experience in land management and water catchment management. Don, how could you possibly describe your summer?
Well, thanks, Osher, and thanks, ACF and Australia at Home. Look, first, I just want to say I'm just the old fella in the back seat of the truck, and a relatively new RFS member in the Tathra Brigade. And I want to respect and pay respect and acknowledge the really serious work that so many RFS and associated services did this summer. And look, particularly the people in leadership roles, the brigade captains and crew leaders and people in the headquarters. What an awesome burden those people have had to carry throughout a really long, dangerous summer. So look, I don't want to big note my role. I guess most of the firefighting work that we do isn't the dramatic stuff that you see on the TV news. It's blacking out. It's putting out little spot fires. It's making things safe. It's dirty, sweaty, grimy, hard yakka. And being of advanced years, I'm good for about 2, maybe 3 shifts a week, but they're long shifts, and the next day spent on the couch usually, recovering. But at the same time, we live in actually a little green oasis at the moment, unburned, at the back of Tathra. We're lucky. Everywhere sort of north of Bermagui and inland and south of Eden down this way has been pretty much burned out. So we're lucky. But I did find myself on New Year's Eve with my neighbour, actually, Dave, from over the lake. We found ourselves in Cabargo on the night of New Year's Eve. The main fire had come through in the morning. Again, the dramatic fire front was past, and we were patrolling Cabargo at night, just 2 crews, and that was a little bit like out of a Mad Max. For those who remember Mad Max, an apocalyptic sort of scenario, burnt out town. We did good work. We put out quite a few spot fires, saved a few structures and houses. But it struck me along the way that there was a couple of things dawned on me. One was that we were the only people driving around this town at night. We had our lights flashing in a little Land Cruiser, and we were civil organisation. We were people were in their homes. Not everywhere was burnt out. People were in their homes and obviously fearful. And I'm hoping that we gave them some reassurance that they hadn't been totally abandoned. I think there was a fair bit of feeling of abandonment in Cobargo, but also a growing anger that this is a path that I've been involved in climate awareness action, a local group called Clean Energy for Eternity since 2006, and we've been painting, the scenario that the science is telling us that bushfires are going to get worse. And I was getting more increasingly angry, and I still am, about the smugness and complacency of some of our the people in our society. Not, and it really showed me that that's reckless and dangerous, and we need to address that. I could go on, but I think time to move on. Yeah.
Don, I'm grateful for your, just painting that picture there really gives us an idea not only of the extent of the fire on the front line, but also I think a lot of us here, we're here for a reason, share that anger and share that emotion that you felt that day. I'd like to come to you now, please, Dan, joining us from the far south coast of New South Wales. Dan Morgan, in the lead up to the summertime that devastated so much of Australia, what did you start to notice that was different about the country where you live?
Okay. Hi everyone. Yeah, look, I remember that night when the fire came through. I was looking at the Fire Near Me app that was and was looking at the fire, and at the time it was up near Cooma at Badger, and I thought, wow, maybe in a day or two, in 2 or 3 days in bad conditions, that fire could be here where I live in Tanja, which is a couple of hundred, at least 100 k's away. And then that night I woke up to the police lights escorting all the campers out of the campground here at Tanja at Middle Beach, and I was like, I just woke up in this crazy panic, and it was like, where is this fire? And then I looked at the Fires Near Me, the app, and it was said it was coming up over Mumbler Mountain, which meant that it was basically going to be here in Tanja could be in another 10, 20 minutes. And I was just like in this mad panic, and I ran outside because you can see Mumbler from my house where I live. And I looked, and you could see a little bit of glow, and it's sort of, so it wasn't quite as bad as I first thought. But I was just amazed how fast the fires were travelling this year, and how quick they were travelling through the landscape. And so just a bit of a background with me. I grew up here in Bega, and I previously worked for National Parks and Wildlife Service for 18 years. And so within that time, I had quite a lot of fire experience with wildfires, hazard reduction burns, remote area firefighting. And so I've got quite a bit of experience with firefighting. But I'd never ever seen fires move through the landscape as quick as they did this year. And it was pretty terrifying, actually.
Mate, I'll bet it was, and certainly in a country that you're so familiar with, and a community that you're so ingrained in. What was the emotion that you noticed among the people in the community that night?
Yeah, look, I remember going up and to Wallaga Lake, which is an Aboriginal reserve not far from here. That's where my family's originally from. And I was talking to a couple of the old elders up there, Uncle Eric and Auntie Lorraine, and just Uncle Eric, he's got diabetes, and he's got a few other medical issues, and just the fact that they had to be evacuated, and then had to I remember him saying that they had to sleep in their car one night, at the evacuation centre because there was no beds left, and you know, these are like an elderly couple, and they had to sleep in their car, and then they said the next day was about 40 degrees, and it just really rattled them both, and you know, yeah, it wasn't a good situation.
You're absolutely. I mean, what you're describing there is a great metaphor, I think, for many people, in that it was just so unexpected, and so many people from very different generations who might have been ignoring or maybe not been aware how much things were changing under their feet suddenly in the face of it. But surely you'd noticed things changing over the months and years leading up to it, surely.
Yeah, look, I just like, I think the forest, we need to like start looking after country, and we need to, I think like the land's been mismanaged for too long. We need to like start manage the land correctly and start looking at old ways and go back to old ways. Hazard reduction burns are obviously not working. You know, it's based on reducing fuel loads per hectare, and that's creating a hot, you know, quite a hot fire. And I noticed within my time firefighting the effects of hazard reduction burns and what they were doing to different country types.
I'll bet that was tough for you to witness. Just to kind of open it up a bit, now we've got a bit of an idea of where we've come from. We've just kind of described another shock that's happened to our community that some of us were very prepared for, but a lot of us were quite unprepared for. Like, by prepared, I mean mentally prepared. Clearly, there was a lot of resourcing that wasn't there. We've all seen the reports on that. But here we are in another shock, in a pandemic, where we're being really tested, I see, as a community as far as our resilience goes. Can I come back to you, Michelle? When you described earlier, the uptick of mental illness and mental health issues in the community that you were seeing. When it comes to community resilience, what do we need to start building to face this future that is coming? And what can we learn about what we're experiencing right now about some of the gaps and some of the opportunities that we might have?
Yeah, that's a very good question. At the moment, everyone's sort of gone in hideaway in a way, because we, you know, obviously are afraid of catching coronavirus, and B, being personally fined or in trouble with the law for going out into public spaces. So we've had to reinvent the wheel in some ways when it comes to, maybe we're physically distancing, but we've found new ways to still socialize. So it's been amazing what we can do with technology. And I've noticed how quickly we've all had to adapt. I mean, obviously not all of us. There's a large section of the community, particularly in the area here, who don't have internet access, or are in a demographic where they don't know how to access the internet. So how do we go forward in this situation, not leaving people behind? And so we've had to be creative in other ways as well. And I do really like the viral kindness, the kindness pandemic, I think that's what it's called, that has motivated people to think outside the square. So there was like suggestions on how to drop little letters to your neighbours who might be isolating and on their own, leaving your number and offering to give them support in some ways, whether it's to help them with them shopping or even just a phone call. People putting out rainbows and teddy bears for families to spot on their walks, and a variety of other ways that people have been creative in coming together. So that's been really lovely to see the community do that, and it's been happening in my own town. So I can't comment on other people's communities, but I think there are novel ways we can come forward. But obviously we have to move beyond the fear and anxiety that's overwhelming us and look to positive ways of coming out of this and supporting each other as an entire community.
Because I know this from my own experience, Michelle, it's extraordinarily debilitating, and it can stop you in your tracks when you really start to think about what it is we're facing. Yet it is only in my experience, and I don't know, I'd like to get your thoughts on this. In my experience, it is in acceptance and then action that I find respite to my own climate anxiety. When it comes, and those two things then give me resilience to then deal with the various changes. And like 2 days ago here in Sydney, it's nearly 30 degrees and we're in winter. It's, I'm just trying to do the shopping, man, and it's hard. What would you say around things that people might be able to do on their own terms, like within themselves, to help build their own resilience personally?
Yeah, that's a really a big question I've been thinking about as well, how to develop personal resilience. And I don't think there's a panacea for this. It comes back to absolute simple things. For example, having time off social media, because I think that is a huge addiction for people right now. They're going to be sitting at home, not doing a lot of other stuff, perhaps feeling overwhelmed and disconnected. So what do? Pop on social media, have a scroll, and then you've got this constant bombardment of the worst stories in the world. That's not great for human underlying mental health, for example. So, make sure you limit your time on social media and try to find and read positive stories. Look for stories of hope. The next thing is, getting sleep. Adequate sleep, eating 3 meals a day, making sure you get up and you do have a breakfast, Daniel and Osher, because that's a great way to start yourself up for the day. And so, it's those sorts of things, making sure you incorporate some physical activity in each day. So it's basic things that our mammalian human bodies need to stay fit and healthy each day, that sets our minds up as well to be healthier and deal with some of the things that are going on around us.
Thank you so much for that. That does give us at least something that we can do on this day, this Wednesday, we can do together. But as far as next summer goes, I know there isn't a lot of fuel left to burn, Don, but we do have a bit of a double whammy here in that over this past crisis, we saw people were able to gather in shelters, but we're probably not going to have a vaccine by the next fire season. Have you started to think about what we might be able to do to keep people safe with the pandemic around and the threat of any more bushfires?
I can't say I've thought about the way the COVID-19 plays out, except to say that with our fire crew, we've got a green team and a blue team. We've split into 2 teams. So if one team goes down, we've still got another one. Now, I don't know if I've got much to say on that one, Osher. But what I could say is I think our society was pushed to its limits and beyond in dealing with these fires. Let's not forget, those fires came on the back of drought and heat. Really bad drought, which we're still in an intense drought down here too in the Bega Valley. It's still declared intense, very dry. So next summer already isn't looking too flash from a fire point of view. But we were pushed beyond our limits, and it made me realise that really we're still in rural Australia and regional Australia, part of the developing world. The Princes Highway to Victoria, one of our main arteries and thoroughfares, was closed for 5 weeks. Unthinkable in a capital city that you can't even, but that's the reality, and that's nobody's fault. It's just the resourcing here. We have real, we're pushed. We couldn't stop those fires.
Yeah.
With all of our civilization, we were unable to stop them. We were able to save lots of houses, but we couldn't save them all. And we lost hundreds of houses in the Bega Valley and Yurbadella. Over 500 houses between those 2 shires, more I think. So it's something that we have to recognise the limits to our capacity, and then I think what I'd want to talk about a bit is how we deal with that.
Well, yeah, indeed. We're talking about resilience now. We might be able to build resilience as our community adapts to an ever-changing world now with a pandemic popped on top of climate change, which is great. What do you see we need to be doing to build that resilience?
Well, look, there's a few things. My wife Louise used to tell me to shut up when I would yell at the TV put some clothes on. When you see pictures of people with a hose in their hand, fighting a fire, wearing a t-shirt and shorts, it's a recipe for, it just shows how ignorant we are in terms of fire literacy. And I think we need throughout our whole of our society, like we have, teach kids to swim so they don't drown. We should be teaching everybody how to get ready and behave and understand what bushfires are about. We need better capacity to respond, so so I don't have to yell at the TV. Next summer, put something on, put some cotton on, put something like that. So there's that. We also need, bushfire planning for around what are we going to do? Where's the safe place, Michelle? Saying, well, where do we go to safe? We need a lot more help. I think we need government. Government can't do everything, but what it can do is facilitate and help coordinate. And I think we need coordinated and supported everybody who's in a fire danger area to be helped to make those plans, rather than just say, enact your fire plan. Pretty hard if you don't really know what it should be. I come from catchment management and a field called extension, where you help people to work through those things. You actually put resources in to helping. And the other thing I think we need, you see communities where there is local leadership and they respond a lot better and they deal a lot better than communities that don't have that effective leadership. And that's kind of ad hoc at the moment. You're lucky if you've got good leaders, you're not. But we've had outstanding local leadership in the Bega Valley in a lot of ways, at the regional, at the shire level and in some communities, but others are falling behind. So I think we need to not let people fall behind. That needs to become a motto. And we need to talk a bit about that, what mateship, this mateship, this Australian thing. Well, let's put some bones in that. And it's really, I think the motto should be, well, nobody gets left behind, whether it's a bushfire or a recovery or whatever. We need to make sure we're looking after each other, and we've got a bit of social equity and justice happening as we come out of all this.
What does that look like, Don? And I live in a massive city, and where only in these last 10 weeks have I learned the names of my neighbours. But I live in a humongous city, and you get that strange paradox where I'm in a city of millions and millions of people, but I know nobody. Yet, as I'm speaking with people in smaller communities, everyone knows everyone. So that's kind of it comes with the territory of living in a smaller community. What needs to happen around enrolling Australians in the idea? And we're seeing it right now. People are, if I'm going to the shops, I need to be careful what I do so I don't make someone else sick. People are thinking about strangers' welfare, so they're staying home. What needs to happen to draw that out a little more from outside of a pandemic, more towards resilience as a community, towards climate mitigation and adaptation?
Well, I can't answer for cities. I'm a refugee from Melbourne from 50 years ago nearly. So I really don't know the answer in cities. That's one of the reasons I think I'm attracted to rural Australia, is that you get community. No matter who you are, you've got a face. You're known. So I don't know. I'm not qualified on the city side. Country, I think we need to invest in local leadership programs for that sort of thing. We need to invest in helping people access knowledge, information. We need to be much more proactive and also joining up and coordinating government services. There's an effort, but it needs to be better.
That's an extraordinary point that you make there about the leadership being important, because it is in those times of crisis when, as Dan mentioned, you wake up in the middle of the night, as Dan said, and there's, emergency lights flashing in your window. You're basically looking for someone to say, here's where to go, here's what to do. And as you mentioned, Don, that some communities got really lucky and others didn't. So the investment in actual leadership structure is in these communities. That's a very interesting point you make. Dan, there's a lot of chat going on the Zoom at the moment. A lot of questions about something that you mentioned, the cultural burning practices that you were talking about. We do have people watching from overseas. They may not be so aware of what that is and how it's different to back burning or other kind of burning management. Could you please maybe describe that a bit, please, Dan?
Yeah, okay, sure. Look, so basically, like cultural burning is the traditional fire regime of Australia before colonisation. It's the way we manage country and the way we managed our land through fire. And so it was about reading the landscape and breaking the landscape down into different country types. And so, for example, here where I live in spotted gum country, which is like, we call it a full gum country. And then so from here, you go down towards the beach. So we'll start down on the beach first. So at Middle Beach, you're on the beach and you've got sand dune country. You come up from the beach into the car park and you've got coastal country, which is like a coastal mahogany country. And then as you drive out of the car park, you come into, say, woolly butt and coastal grey box country. And then only another 50 metres down the road, you come into spotted gum country. And so they're all different country types. And it's a bit like, I guess it's a bit like a garden. And so those areas need to be maintained and need to be managed. And if you don't manage and maintain those areas, just like a garden, it gets full of weeds. But the weeds that we talk about here, they're not introduced weeds. They're like native weeds. It's a native species. The native species that creep into different country types and start choking up the area. And so we manage those areas through fire, but it had to be the right type of fire. And it was a fire that we didn't decide when to put the fire in. The country told us, those different country types told us when it was ready for fire through certain indicators. And so when that indicator appeared within that country type, we'd put fire in. And it was generally a cool fire, like just a small trickle fire that you walk with. And it's like, it's respecting fire. So in our culture, fire is a living spirit. And so by respecting fire and using it the right way, it can be your friend. It becomes your friend. And so when we put fire into those areas, then it's like a reset for that country type, that garden. And then, so, we'll put certain plants will then flower, bees will come in, birds, marsupials, and it's this whole cycle. And as within that cycle, our role within that cycle as humans was to reset that country type and maintain that area. And so with hazard reduction burns, hazard reduction burns are based on reducing fuel loads per hectare, and they're normally a block burn. And so within one block hazard reduction burn, you can have 5, 6 different country types that's all being treated the same way. So it's a bit like maybe being a doctor and given a certain area, given a patient a medicine for kidney problems when they have a heart problem. So it's kind of like a little bit sort of like that. And so hazard reduction burns, they're also it's about burning for hectares and not country types.
That makes a lot of sense, Dan. But I'm guessing that these are traditional ways of managing land that relied upon a predictable climate. Now that the climate is changing so much, do you feel that these practices will be able to adapt?
Yeah, I think so, because look, I have noticed a few odd things within the weather, but I think because it's a low risk fire that we apply, and it's about getting those country types back to health again. And so once we just like, so when I talk about like getting country back to health and it not being an overnight fix, it's because the way we've managed country for 200 years, it's been mismanaged for 200 years. So it's not an overnight fix with cultural burning, but the system does work. It's not an overnight fix because the system doesn't work. It's because the state the country is in at the moment. And so it's yeah, look, I think it's adaptable.
That's great. That's great. That's great. That's great to hear, and it's very important to understand that. From what I gather, what you're saying is that to appreciate that it might not happen on our timeline. That this is a 200-year problem that got us here. It's going to take a little longer. We're not going to get it done before next summer. You know, it's going to take a little time to manage. Let me just bring in Barsha Stasak from the ACF. Barsha, now that we're in this COVID-19 situation, and there's obviously a lot of economic issues, a lot of unemployment, what lessons do you think the government could take from what's happened with these fires through to the post-COVID-19 recovery, or this new world that we live in now with COVID-19 as a part of it, Barsha? Are you there, Barsha? I think someone's furiously trying to unmute Barsha. She's somewhere. We're getting there, Paul? Just give us a nod. We're not?
Yes, I think I'm now unmuted.
We got you there, Barsha. Hey, Barsha.
Hello, apologies. Couldn't quite do it myself there. That's a really excellent question. I think, look, there's a number of lessons that we can learn from both the bushfire crisis, but also the approaches we've seen governments and communities take to COVID-19 so far. And the one I think that I draw the most hope from is the signs that when we work together, when communities and governments work together, and we actually have the ability to do that. I think one of the amazing things we've actually seen out of COVID so far, and still got a long way to go, is that when governments work together and when communities work together, we can tackle these quite major crises, and we can successfully turn things around. And we should take that lesson and really use it as an approach to how we tackle the climate crisis. And as we slowly move from, tackling the immediacy of COVID into economic recovery and economic rebuilding, we sort of have a perfect opportunity to also look at how we tackle the climate crisis, because the economy that we rebuild is one that should be about acting on climate change. And so there's sort of two main things that governments are looking at. One is the immediate. So where we look at I think there's estimates of up to 1.4 million or more Australians being out of work. And we know that there's literally tens of thousands of jobs in clean energy. There's thousands of jobs in landscape management and landscape recovery, which includes recovery in bushfire affected areas. And these are jobs that we can create immediately and governments can create immediately. And so that should be a key focus. Moving more to the long term and how we rebuild our economy, we should be looking at things that we can do that set us up for a clean energy future, clean energy industries, but also things that really help restore our natural environments. And one of the more concerning things that we've been seeing is, there's a bit of a push as part of our economic recovery to really look more at, fueling fossil fuel industries, at cutting away environmental protections. And we really want to make sure that when we recover for the positive, and we don't do those things and we do the opposite. And I think governments have a choice here, and we as communities really have a role to play in steering them towards the right decisions so that we see the future we want, rather than kind of repeating the past. And in that sense, I think fueling the continued crisis. We've had bushfires, we've had pandemic, we might have another, unfortunately, horrible bushfire seasons, more drought. And that's really not, I think, the future any of us want. And we should use this opportunity to try and change that in the choices we make about how we recover our economy.
Barsha, can I just ask you for an action point? Let's be honest, it's the middle of the day on a Wednesday. We're on an ACF webinar. People are here because they're interested, all right? But there's squillions of people that are carrying on with their day, and they may not be at all aware or present to what it is that we're talking about. There's no fault of theirs. That's just how it is. Barsha, what does action look like? What does that action look like outside of an election?
I think there's a couple of things, but I'll try and give you a quick and short answer. And I think the main thing that people can do that have the time is actually get in touch with their local representatives, be they state and federal, because we know that these conversations are happening now. And people need to, like, politicians need to hear from their communities about how they want that recovery to look. So if we focus on an immediate thing people can do, that's one critical step.
And when you do reach out to them, if you do get a chance to, like, that's what, writing a letter, that's writing an email, that's making a phone call. What sort of things are we talking? What does the conversation sound like? Because this might be the first time. It's tricky and it's hard. And politics by its nature is like, you don't understand me, so you can't talk to me. What does that conversation sound like?
So first of all, I should say, look, ACF has a bunch of resources on its website and that we email around how do you approach your politician on these things. So happy to show those. I think the fundamental thing with politicians is you need to start from your own personal perspective. They are actually genuinely, I know this is hard to believe, genuinely interested in what their constituents think because they need their constituents to get elected. And so you should absolutely start from your perspective and then talk about the kind of jobs that they should be focusing on creating and the kind of policies that they should be focusing on creating. And I think for us, obviously, that is things around protecting the natural environment and clean energy, and not things like cutting environmental protections and fossil fuels.
Got it. And I'm grateful to hear you say that, because it does remind me, it's taken me 3 months to get a time out. I've actually got a phone call with my MP today. So I'm grateful. I was kind of asking that for myself today. But it did take a lot of time. It took a lot of emails. It took a lot of phone calls with their assistants to make sure that I wasn't, going to go Burko on them, but it's just a chance to have a conversation. May I ask you this, Michelle, when it comes to, as someone who works in community health, as a GP in your area, it's impossible. And, let's be honest, we have a public healthcare system, one that is funded by the taxpayer. Is it possible to separate environmental health from community health? And do we need to care for one to care for the other?
Yes, absolutely. We need to care for both. And I think that people are starting to see that connection between what's going on in our environment and how it is impacting our health, although it can be subtle in some ways. But we know, for example, air pollution kills 3,000 Australians each year, but millions more globally. I mean, it's unbelievable, really, that we allow this to happen. So I think people are making that connection and hopefully are willing to now fight for the protection of our environment and how fundamentally it is important to our health. Biodiversity, so important to human health as well. And we're seeing a mass extinction occurring, and we don't know really how that is going to impact us. All we know is that it's not going to be good. I just also wanted to say a couple of other points, that tackling climate change is also the greatest global health opportunity for the 21st century. And some of the things that we can do to tackle climate change also promote resilience in a community. So after experiencing the bushfires, and we had 3 roads out of our community that were shut down, we had no ability to bring in fuel and food. So we had to be reliant on what we had here. If that in future situations is prolonged for periods, we will be really stuck. And so we do each need to think about our own resilience and what we can produce locally in our own communities. Now, when we also increase local food production, that's providing jobs, it's providing health, fresh food for people. So, I mean, you can see how they're so interconnected. Now, am I answering your question?
You are. I was asking you about, environmental health and community health, and how we might be able to help one to help the other.
Yeah, exactly. And so another way of reducing air pollution is switching to green energy. And that's another way of tackling resilience. So my friends and neighbours who had solar with batteries didn't suffer from the power outages like the rest of us did. Those who had electric cars didn't have to line up in the queues for the small amount of fuel that remained in our community. So it's a no-brainer. And having those vehicles and that energy doesn't create pollution, but it also creates jobs for communities. And we can bring money into communities through exploring these and bringing these technologies into our communities. So I don't understand why we are still giving handouts and lots of our taxpayer dollars to these giant industries that are directly linked to global heating. So fossil fuel companies are getting support right now from our taxpayer dollars. That should be going into helping communities transition today, and it'd be better for us all, you know.
And certainly, as Barsha mentioned, a lot of opportunity for economic growth on the other side of COVID-19, and how that might move forward. Don, a question from you: What would you like to see? What would you like to see before the next bushfire season? What would you like to see as far as support, or what would you like to see as far as awareness outside of "don't wear a t-shirt"? What would you like to see before the next bushfire season?
This is the time for that Imagine photo, folks, if that's possible to bring that up, the solar farm in Tathra. Look, I want to talk about just imagining the future for a second, because these things are going to play out in the by-election in Eden-Monaro. And there's not much time left, so I'll get to the point. Indigenous ranger groups are funded all over Northern Australia. We need them down here in this electorate and elsewhere on the eastern seaboard. And they could be playing out the really vital work that Dan's been talking about with cultural burning. I want a safer landscape around me. It's going to take time. It needs resourcing. I've been helping the local Aboriginal Land Council to develop cultural burning programs, and they keep running up against resourcing issues. For goodness sake, let's get this happening. We all need it. The farmers are generally saying that too. So let's just agree on getting some cultural burning happening. And in terms of renewables and prosperity, let's talk about prosperity. Oh, there's 100% by 2030. That's the Tathra water tower. That's our regional, or certainly across the Bega Valley Shire now. That's our target. The science is saying this is where we've got to be. We've got to get to that, or we're committing our grandchildren and great grandchildren to 2, 3, 4 degrees temperature rise. Come on, let's stop this now. We can. So, and if we invest in renewable energy locally, just back of the envelope, order of magnitude, $100 million spent in this Bega Valley Shire on power and fuel, probably a little bit more. That every cent of that goes out of our local economy and goes to the generators and retailers and the shareholders, some of whom are overseas. So every kilowatt hour of energy that we can produce here and keep those dollars here by having local ownership, that's a massive input. So if we could get to 100% by 2030 renewable energy locally, then there's at least $100 million back in our community that's circulating. That's prosperity. That's the future. And we could be exporting hydrogen from our wonderful port in Eden. Renewable hydrogen. We've got to have these visions and this imagination, and the election's the place to start these conversations in earnest.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that a lot, Dan. Dan, I've got a question from you. Got a question for you, Dan. This is from Carol S. What do we say? Because there was a lot of misinformation around these fires, as everybody knows. What do we say to those who say the fires were due to years of not doing the necessary clearing and backburning? Do you have an answer for that, Dan? How do you have that conversation?
Yeah, look, I tend to disagree. Like, I think by clearing the land and by disturbing the land, we're getting a lot of, and by putting in hazard reduction burns, we're getting a lot of these invasive native species that are coming back, that are fire dominant species. And what it's doing, it's filling in the mid-story. So you've got the lower story, which is like grasses and the native sedges, and then you've got the canopy, and then you've got a mid-story within the forest. And so by disturbing the forest and disturbing the soil and putting in hot fires, you're getting these fire dominant species that are coming back that fill in that mid-story and start choking up the mid-story. So when a wildfire does come through, it acts as a ladder fuel and it climbs into the canopy of the fire, into the canopy of the trees, and creates a wall of fire, which is then just travels like so quick. When we've got healthy country and we've got like a knee-high lower grassy understory with native sedges and native grasses, then that maintains soil moisture. And we still have shrub species, but it's not so thick and choked up, so that when a wildfire does come through, it doesn't get the opportunity to climb into the canopy. It just rolls through the native grasses and doesn't have a chance to get into the canopy. And that's what I've noticed with 18 years of firefighting experience of doing hazard reduction burns that are hot fires, is creating these mid-story species. And so we're burning to reduce fuel loads, but in the long term, we're creating more fuel loads within these ladder fuels.
That's an extraordinary way to have it explained, Dan. That last minute was just that was better than every article I think I read over the summer, mate. I really appreciate that. I had just on a personal note, I had a conversation with an economist this week, and he kind of allayed my fears when I kind of said to him, like, how come politicians don't believe in climate change? How come they don't believe in science? He goes, they absolutely believe in science, because look how they've crushed the curve on COVID-19. They can do all this stuff around climate mitigation. They just don't want to. So, Dan, when it does come to having conversations with people about what needs to change, people who might be a little stubborn, what's the way that you approach them? How do you have that conversation with them?
Well, yeah, look, it can be difficult, especially within the firefighting system, where you have like this hierarchy military system where you have the incident controller, divisional commander, crew leader, and it's like this system that our culture and our cultural fire practitioners don't fall under, and we don't get recognised as fire practitioners, and so, you know, look, we want to work with RFS, and we want to work with national parks and all these other fire agencies, but we don't want to work for them. And so that, you know, we want to like, so what I mean by that is that we should have the opportunity to lead this, and this is our culture, this is our traditional land management, and it's so important for everyone to learn and understand. But we need to lead it, and we need to have that opportunity. You know, like, so there's so many private property owners want us to go and do burns on their land, but then, you know, what happens, you know, if fire goes down into a tree root and then pops up, say, a week later in the bad weather conditions and then burns down someone's house? We're not insured,
right?
You know? We're putting ourselves out on a limb, but then RFS and national parks, forests, they have that insurance that covers them. And so look, basically, to get back to your answer, really, look, we want to work with everyone, and we want to share this knowledge, but it's important that we lead it.
I appreciate that very much. We are coming up to our time here, so before we go, Don, was there any final words you might have had for everyone watching today about what kind of resilience we might be able to want to be building in our community on the back of these bushfires and this pandemic?
Look, I think I already said it. We can invest in local ownership and joint ownership of clean energy, and if we can get behind the cultural burning programs with Indigenous ranger funded projects. We don't have to invent anything new, and we can see a path, at least for some form of recovery.
And Michelle, as someone in the healthcare space, and obviously we spoke at length earlier about the mental health issues that do surround just the uncertainty of moving forward in a world that is incredibly just more uncertain every day. What would you like to see, and do you have any final words before we get out of here?
Look, I think that during these difficult times, enormous growth is absolutely possible, and we could emerge stronger and more resilient and more caring and ready to face this uncertain future together. We just have to dream big, and we have to come together. No more us and them. We need to find a way to unite and go forth. And I believe we can do it.
Magnificent. Michelle, thank you so very much for your time today. Thank you, Daniel Morgan. Thank you, Dr. Michelle Hamrosi, and thank you very much, Don McPhee. I'm very grateful that you were able to have me be a part of this today. And I'll hand back to Paul from the Australian Conservation Foundation. Paul, thanks for having me, mate.
Thank you, Osher, and signing off, everyone. Look, thank you for your time and thank you for a great conversation. Have a great rest of the day and week.